Hey, everybody, and welcome to another deep dive with us. Today, we're going way back in time,
Okay.
exploring the book of Leviticus, specifically chapter 24.
Leviticus.
Now,
Yeah.
you might not think
Yeah.
ancient laws have much to do with us today, but believe me, this chapter touches on some surprisingly relevant stuff.
It really does.
Yeah.
What we often miss about Leviticus is that it's not just a rule book, it's a window into the values and principles that held a society together, even thousands of years ago.
Okay, so for those who need a refresher, Leviticus is part of the Hebrew Bible, which is also part of the Christian Old Testament.
Yeah.
Chapter 24 specifically focuses on two main themes: instructions for maintaining the tabernacle, their sacred space, and then a case dealing with blasphemy and how they handled justice back then. Pretty heavy stuff.
Right. Yes. And what's interesting is that both themes actually point to the same underlying concern, living in alignment with what they saw as divine principles.
So how about we start with the tabernacle? What's the significance of all those detailed instructions about keeping it in tip-top shape?
Imagine you're part of this community, constantly on the move. The tabernacle is your portable connection to the divine, the place where you experience the presence of God. So maintaining it wasn't just about keeping things clean, it was about actively demonstrating your commitment to those values.
Okay, that makes sense. But what does that look like in practice? Leviticus 24 gets pretty specific right down to how to tend the lamps and the bread.
Exactly. And each detail has symbolic meaning. Take the lampstand, for example. Keeping it constantly lit represents the eternal presence of God among them. And the bread of presence, which was freshly baked and replaced every week, that symbolizes nourishment, both physical and spiritual.
So it's like they were literally and symbolically feeding their connection to the divine through these actions. It wasn't just a chore, it was a practice. But how does this translate for us today? I mean, we're not exactly wandering the desert with a portable temple.
That's where the metaphor gets really interesting. Think of the tabernacle as representing your own inner space, the values and principles you hold dear. What are the practices that nourish your sense of purpose, your connection to something bigger than yourself?
That's a great question. It's making me think about my own routines and what really fuels my sense of meaning. For some people, it might be meditation or spending time in nature. For others, it could be creative expression or acts of service.
Exactly. The form can change, but the principle remains the same. It's about actively cultivating those inner lamps that keep us grounded and connected.
Okay, so we've got our metaphorical lamps burning bright,
Hmm.
but Leviticus 24 also dives into a darker topic, right? The incident involving blasphemy. Can you walk us through what happened there?
Sure. The text describes a man born to an Israelite woman and an Egyptian father who gets into a fight with another Israelite. In the heat of the argument, he curses the name of God, essentially committing blasphemy.
Whoa, that's heavy stuff.
Hmm.
It seems like blasphemy wasn't just about bad language, it was a serious offense. Why was that?
For the Israelites, the name of God represented everything they held sacred: their identity, their covenant, their very way of life. To blaspheme was to strike at the core of their beliefs and the foundation of their community.
So it was seen as a direct attack on their values, not just an insult. How did they respond to this act of blasphemy?
Moses, as their leader, consults with God, and the punishment is severe. The man is to be stoned to death by the entire community. It was a harsh punishment reflecting how seriously they took any threats to their shared values. Yeah, it was a harsh punishment. It reflected how seriously they took any threats to their shared values.
It really makes you think about the power of words and actions, especially within a community. We may not have public stonings anymore, thankfully,
Yeah.
but that sense of accountability, that still resonates, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It's about recognizing that we're all part of something larger than ourselves, and our actions have consequences. We have a responsibility to uphold the values that bind us together.
Okay, so we've explored maintaining our inner lamps and navigating respect and boundaries. But Leviticus 24 doesn't stop there. It also delves into the principles of justice, specifically the idea of an eye for an eye.
Yes, and that phrase is often misunderstood. People tend to interpret it as promoting revenge, but its original intent was quite different.
Yeah. At first glance, it does sound pretty brutal. What's the real story behind an eye for an eye?
Well, before this principle, punishments were often arbitrary and could be excessive. An eye for an eye aimed to establish a more balanced system where the punishment fit the crime. It was about ensuring fairness and proportionality.
So it was actually a step towards a more just system, trying to limit the potential for excessive retaliation.
Exactly. It was about creating a system that aimed for restoration rather than escalation. Instead of spiraling into endless cycles of vengeance, the idea was to restore a sense of equilibrium.
That's a completely different way of looking at it.
Mhm.
So how does this concept of balanced justice apply to us today? I mean, We don't go around taking literal eyes for eyes anymore, thankfully.
Of course not. But the underlying principle still holds relevance. It's about striving for fairness and proportionality in how we respond to wrongdoing. It's about finding solutions that address the harm done without causing further damage.
So it's not about revenge, but about accountability and restoration.
Precisely. It's about seeking a resolution that acknowledges the wrong, addresses the harm, but also aims to move forward in a constructive way.
It makes you think about how we approach conflict, both on a personal level and as a society. It's a reminder to seek solutions that promote healing and understanding, even in the face of wrongdoing.
That's a really important point. It's about recognizing that justice isn't just about punishment. It's also about creating a space for growth and reconciliation.
You know, I came into this deep dive thinking it would be all about dusty rules and ancient rituals, but it's turned out to be so much more than that.
It's amazing how these seemingly obscure texts can spark such relevant conversations, isn't it?
It really is. Leviticus 24 has really challenged me to think differently about how I approach my own life and my interactions with others.
What stood out to you the most?
I think the idea of the tabernacle as a metaphor for our inner lives was really powerful. It's a reminder that we all have those lamps, to tend to those practices that nourish our values and connect us to something larger than ourselves.
That's a beautiful insight, and it highlights how our inner world and our outer actions are deeply intertwined.
Exactly. And then the whole discussion about blasphemy and justice, it made me realize how important it is to create a space where everyone feels safe and respected, even when there's disagreement.
That's a crucial point. It's about fostering a culture of understanding and accountability rather than resorting to punishment or exclusion. It's about creating a space for dialogue and growth.
And the eye for an eye principle.
Ah.
That was a real eye-opener. I always thought of it as this harsh, vengeful concept. But to see it as a step towards a more balanced system of justice, that was fascinating.
It challenges our assumptions, doesn't it? It reminds us to look beyond the surface and to consider the deeper historical and social context.
And it also makes you think about how we can apply that principle of balanced justice in our own lives. It's not about revenge, but about seeking resolutions that restore harmony and promote understanding.
Well said. It's a reminder that even ancient texts can offer valuable guidance for navigating the complexities of modern life.
Absolutely.
Oh.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Leviticus 24, I hope you're leaving with a sense of wonder and a few new insights to ponder. What are some practices that help keep you grounded and connected to what matters most?
Yes. What helps you navigate those tricky waters of respect and accountability in your own life? We'd love to hear your thoughts.
Thanks for joining us on this journey. Until next time, keep seeking, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.